What if I told you that the Democrats can be just as racist as any Republican you'll ever meet? Stay curious, guys. What's going on, Curious Idiot Gang? We're back with another video. This is going to be an introductory video to a series that we're titling An Honest Discussion on Race, Politics, and Police. Now, the reason why we wanted to produce this video was because of everything happening right now all over the world, particularly in the USA, after the murder of George Floyd and other events that have taken part recently. So I just wanted to basically give perspective and shed light on different factors that we may not necessarily be looking at in the sphere of public debate. I've noticed that there's one side that dominates the discussion, and I wanted to look at the other side or give light to other perspectives because this is a discussion that is very important to everybody. It impacts everybody, and it's something that's been going on for a long time. Before we start, guys, I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's been listening or followed the Curious Idiot page on IG. I appreciate the support, and I urge you guys to comment on the videos with your own perspective. Let's get the discussion going. This is why I started this page, is because we gotta get a discussion going about things that we're not comfortable talking about. So without further ado, guys, part one of this series is about the Democratic Party and racial politics. It seems like the Democratic Party has had a monopoly on the black vote for a while now. If you go as far back as the 2004 election, just for a shorter time frame of reference, the Democratic Party has gotten no less than 88% of the black vote, according to all the exit polls. You can go back even further into past elections and see that the Democratic Party has had a monopoly on the black vote for a while. It appears that the Democratic Party is the party of the African American and minorities in general. But why is that? Let's take a look, guys. So let's get into the history of the Democratic Party first, just to shed a broader context on the party. The Democratic Party was the party of Jim Crow, slavery, and the KKK. It was the Democrats that were upholding the Confederacy and were part of the Confederacy, guys. If you look at the history of United States elections during that time and even a little further after the Civil War, all the southern states that we know today, like the Kentuckys, the Tennessees, the South Carolinas, etc., Texas, they were all voting Democrat. So Democrats posed something called the Southern Strategy to explain why they lost the South and why Republicans won the South, starting in the mid-80s, early 90s. Now, there are three myths that comprise the Southern Strategy. Let's take a look at them. Myth number one, the Republicans had to pander to white Southern racists in order to get their vote. This is not factual due to the fact that Republicans actually started garnering a little bit of support here and there as early as the 1920s in the South. From 1952 to 56, Dwight Eisenhower almost swept the South, and that was after he supported Brown v. Board of Education, which was a landmark court case to end desegregation in public schools. Myth number two, Democrats switched sides after the Civil Rights Act and went Republican. This is not facts. One of 21 Democrats that opposed the Civil Rights Act went to the other side. The rest were either re-elected or replaced by other Democrats. Myth number three, since the implementation of the Southern Strategy, the Republicans dominated the South. This is not true. Republican Richard Nixon lost the South in '68, and in 1976's federal election, Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, won the South. Bill Clinton, in 1992, who was obviously a Democrat as we all know, nearly swept the South in that year's election. The Republicans did not hold a majority of the South until about '94, 30 years after the Civil Rights Act. So why did it take 30 years if they were all supposedly racist to transition to the other side? If we're going by the myth of the Southern Strategy. The South might be slow, but not that slow. The truth is that the South probably changed as people do. The South tends to be more conservative, politically and socially. They tend to vote more conservative, and the more conservative party today are the Republicans. So why do we have to attribute the South to automatically being racist when the fact of the matter is racists exist everywhere? It could be a matter of those people's values align more with one party, and that explains why Southerners are more likely to be willing to elect black Republicans as opposed to white Democrat senators. Maybe the Southern Strategy was just the Dems' excuse as to why they lost the South. Next item list on the agenda is Democratic legislation. What bills have the Democrats passed, and what were their impacts, especially on the black community? Now, it might be surprising to you guys, but some of the most important and crucial bills on the war on drugs were passed and written by Democrats. What were these bills? Let's take a look. So first, we've got the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which was written and introduced to the House by James C. Wright, a Texas Democrat. What did the bill contain? So the bill increased mandatory minimums for drug-related offenses from 22 months to 33 months, effectively adding a year on minimum sentences. It also increased the number of drug-related offenses with mandatory minimums. 2 years later, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of '88, which was written by Thomas Foley, a Washington State Democrat. It reintroduced the death penalty, and it expanded the state's capability for the war on drugs. Alright, this one's a doozy. This is the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of '94. Can you guys guess who wrote it? Any takers? Nobody? Well, guys, it was Joe Biden. Yes, the Joe Biden, the one that can't remember where he's at or which state he's campaigning in. The bill provided for 100,000 new police officers statewide and $9.7 billion of prison funding. The Justice Policy Institute stated that in 2008, the Clintons' tough on crime approach led to some of the largest mass incarceration in the United States in history. Also, this bill overturned a crucial part of the Higher Education Act of 1965, which allowed prison inmates to receive Pell Grants for college and university education, effectively meaning that inmates would no longer have access to post-secondary education and their level of education would not improve at all during their time being incarcerated. Now, what do Democrat cities look like? What's the crime rate? How are they run? What's the structure? Well, truth of the matter is Democrat-run cities have some of the highest crime rates per capita and per 100,000 in America. You go down the list. Since 1949, St. Louis has been run by Democrats only, and St. Louis has 2,082.89 violent crimes per 100,000 people. Chicago, Illinois, the war zone of the United States of America, with some of the highest murder rates in the country, has been Democrat run since 1931. We're almost approaching 100 years of Democrats running Chicago, and their current mayor is a Democrat and a black woman. What has she done for the city to reduce crime? Well, the most recent stats we can find were that Chicago is just under 1,100 violent crimes per 100,000 people. Baltimore, Maryland, since 1967 has been Democrat controlled. What's their violent crime rate? 2,020.07. Guys, I'm not trying to cherry pick stats here. You can look at the list for yourselves, alright? Some of the other cities mentioned are Detroit, Los Angeles, Charlotte. You gotta go quite a ways down the list to find a Republican-run city with a high crime rate, guys. And I'm not trying to cherry pick them. I'm just going by what the stats present me. I'm not taking the side of the Republicans, nor do I advocate for them. I advocate for common sense and rational critique of both sides of the political spectrum. Me personally, I believe that left-wing, right-wing, they're two wings on the same plane. It doesn't matter who you vote for. But if you're gonna live and die on that hill of voting party politics, look at what your party's doing and really contemplate as to why you vote for them. In more recent events, we've had the Seattle CHAZ / CHOP zone, which was a 6-block autonomous zone that protesters seized in Seattle, Washington, where protests were held all day for Black Lives Matter and no police were allowed. Now, within 1 month of CHAZ / CHOP existing, there were 5 shootings there, leaving multiple people injured and a couple people dead. There were also rapes, property damage, and general harassment of the people living in that 6-block zone in Seattle, Washington. Businesses in the area are also suing the city for the damages caused to their property and just the general action that the protesters have taken undermining their business operation. Now, this is also on top of a worldwide pandemic, which has also left a lot of businesses in bad shape. So it's just insult to injury at this point. Jenny Durkan, mayor of Seattle, who's a Democrat by the way, refused to do anything about CHAZ / CHOP. She even went as far as to call it a block party. Take a listen for yourself.
We've got 4 blocks in Seattle that you just saw pictures of that is more like a block party atmosphere. It's not an armed takeover. It's not a military junta.
So she's going as far as to call it a block party, despite the fact that at most block parties, people don't get shot, stabbed, harassed, assaulted, and property doesn't get damaged at block parties. So, if you may have heard, CHAZ / CHOP has recently been disbanded and taken over by the police again. Why is that so? Well, funny enough, Jenny Durkan put the order in to break CHAZ / CHOP down after the protesters made their way to her house. You can protest as long as you don't protest on my lawn, kids. Just how convenient is that, guys? She was all for it until it made its way to her front door. What a people's champ. Next item list on the agenda is Tim Scott, the Republican senator from South Carolina. He recently introduced a bill into the Senate about police reform, which the Democrats struck down and voted against. What did this bill contain? The bill contained incentives to deter the use of chokeholds, a database that would keep track of use of force incidents, and no knock raids. It would also make way for the purchase of more body cams to be used by police. Lynching would become a federal crime under this bill, and they would also create a commission to study the conditions of black men and black boys and make efforts to recruit and fund black police officers. Now, like I said, the Democrats blocked this bill. They even went as far as to refuse to debate it, despite the fact that Scott said that all parts of the bill were open to debate. Coincidentally enough, the Democrats pushed their own bill into the Senate that week, which had had a 70 to 75% overlap in the content compared to the Republican bill. The Democrat bill would reform qualified immunity for police. Now, for those of you who don't know what qualified immunity is, it's kind of a clause or a protection given to government officials and police officers in order to shield them from certain critiques and criticisms within the eye of the law, so that they don't have to justify all their actions to the law. Now, we can see how that's problematic, and the Republican bill was missing that, which is true. But by the same token, Republican Senator Mike Braun recently introduced a police reform act that would scale back qualified immunity for police officers as well. The Democrats accuse the Republicans and Scott's bill in general of being just an optical showcase, accusing them of trying to make it look like they did something as they idly sit back and do nothing. Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, fired back at the Dems by accusing them of trying to preserve this issue by not passing real legislation in order to milk it for their electoral causes. Now look guys, our political affiliation shouldn't deter our ability to rationally and critically evaluate legislation and political rhetoric by either side of the political spectrum. Whichever party you align with doesn't mean that you have to automatically view the other party as an evil. That doesn't necessitate that. We should be able to critically evaluate legislation from any side of the political spectrum and debate it as such. No more Republicans are bad, Democrats are good, because as I've shown in this video, there's a lot of things to question about the Democratic Party. Now, if we're being honest about the situation, it looks like both of the parties are jockeying for political power and a chance to say, oh, we did something for the black community, as opposed to working together in order to pass legislation that would help the black community. But if we go back to what Mitch McConnell said, who is the Republican Senate leader, it appears that what he accused the Democrats of, which was trying to preserve this issue to create an electoral boost, is kind of true. This is further underscored by looking at the Black Lives Matter search trends on Google Trends. Now granted, Black Lives Matter was created in 2013 and it's only 2 election cycles in, but if we look at Democratic pandering, it aligns with when Black Lives Matter is trending most. The Democrats are willing to kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the same amount of time that officer had his knee on Floyd's neck, in Kunta Kinte scarves, but are not willing to pass legislation to help the black community. It's all performative activism, which is the same thing that we all accuse each other of on Instagram and Twitter day and night. What makes them any different? And yes, the Democrats did this while Black Lives Matter was at its highest trending peak. Democratic pandering is also further underscored by the Democratic support for Black Lives Matter protests as opposed to the COVID protesters. Now, regardless of your viewpoints on either issue, guys, there were people out there legitimately protesting the coronavirus lockdowns because they were losing money, their businesses were on the brink of bankruptcy, and they needed to get back to work to pay their bills. Is that not a legitimate issue? Yet, the Democrats made it seem like those people were selfish and didn't care about anybody. Is it not selfish that the Democrats are willing to allow and encourage those protests that would get more people sick in order to look like they support the movement? You tell me. All this being said, guys, it appears that Democrats have taken advantage of the murder of George Floyd for their own political agenda. That about wraps up the video for today, guys. I want to leave you guys with the message of reconsidering who we vote for and why we vote for them. Alright, think about it hard. Why do you vote for who you vote for? Is it just because the Twitter mob tells you to? Is it just because CNN tells you to? I want us to get to a point where we're all independent thinkers that can rationally and critically evaluate legislation and politics, where we don't let our political partisanship impact how we view the other side, because the other side doesn't have to be evil. I encourage you guys to debate with them, discuss with them. It honestly breaks my heart to see members of the black community who are conservative and vote Republican be called Uncle Toms or other derogatory terms. Your blackness is not in your politics, and I find it shameful that we would think that way. Painting every single conservative or Republican as a racist is a sweeping generalization, which is a logical fallacy, and it is plain dishonest. Conservative, Republican, or liberal Democrat, these are all people that suffer from the same issues of being human, alright? We probably have a lot more common with each other than we do with the politicians we're voting for. So the last thing I'll say for you guys is this: our politics shouldn't discredit us in the sphere of public debate. Like I said, listen to everybody and hear their points out. Not everybody that's on the other side of the aisle is a racist or hates black people or hates women or whatever political issue of the day we're talking about. Really take the time to listen and hear them out. Maybe they have a point. Because usually the truth isn't on one side or the other. It's usually in the middle. Life is not black and white, it's shades of gray. It's harder to find people on the right that are participating in doxing, cancel culture, and are calling everybody that disagrees with them racist. It really is. That's all I gotta say for the video, guys. I encourage you guys to like, comment, and share the video. We're just starting, so your support is how we're gonna grow this channel, how we're gonna grow the debate, and we really appreciate you guys that are tuning in and that have hit the follow button already. As you may have noticed, the production quality has upped a little bit, and we're trying new things, so just bear with us as we try. But one thing that will never change about this channel is discussion. Start the discussion, keep it going, and don't stop, guys. Let's use our freedom of speech for something useful. Alright? Stay curious, guys.